Okay, the streaming is going on, just so, just so you know, the streaming, hello, ladies? You can talk, but just so you know, the streaming is going on, and what you're saying can be picked up. Just so you're not saying something about your neighbors or your.
We're fine, thank you.
Not that that's ever happened. Open mic, uh-oh. I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's like,
No, there was
you don't know how.
nothing of a problem. Thank you.
I take this opportunity to speak well of my in-laws. Oh, it's on the tape. What a difference it is when you have a little good weather. And I feel like we should have a parade. Well, it'll be fine. It'll be good. Everything will be good.
I can't see you at all.
Is that better?
That's much better, thank you.
As close as I can get to George.
Used to be, I used to rent the space. Yeah, eat at Joe's on the back.
I'm back, so you can't do like some dancing.
What's Memorial Day, May 31st, right? 82 degrees, 24% chance of rain.
That's not, that's a traditional summer.
Never know this far out, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Subject to change.
Yeah.
I've seen some pretty cold Memorial Days. Pretty cold Memorial Days. Okay, I guess it's 7 o'clock, so I will call the Southbury Board of Selectmen regular meeting, May 20, 2021 to order at 7 p.m. Have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up, we have a public hearing proposal of Essentra Care Alliance. Is there anybody that would like to speak at the public hearing? Oh. Could you state your name for the record, please?
I will. I'm Gail McTaggart from the law firm of Secor, Cassie, McPartland, and I represent Essentra Care Alliance and its interest in the Lutheran Home in Southbury. And I have with me Michelle Bettengall.
Hello, everyone.
Michelle is actually a resident of Southbury. She's been here for over 12 years, and she's the Chief Senior Care Officer at the Lutheran Home. There's an interesting requirement for the kind of bond funding that's going on where the Lutheran Home is buying its property. The Essentra is buying the property of the Lutheran Home. It's been operating the Lutheran Home, and it's going to own the property and do renovations. So this $35 million bond is going to be money that's put into this community right here in Southbury, even though Essentra owns several facilities, and the bonding requires approval from each one of those facilities in those states. So what happens is that, oops, let me get this. What happens under the federal law and regulations is that in order for there to be tax benefits to investors that are investing in the bond, that there has to be a public hearing in the community where the renovations and the property is located, and that is here in Southbury. There isn't, under the federal regulation, any concern about the authority of this board or or how that relates to this. There's no obligation of the town. The obligation will be entirely part of Essentria's obligation to its bondholders and the people that invest in this and get the tax exemptions and benefits from that. So that's pretty much what we're doing. I've asked Michelle if there have been any correspondence. The notice that was put into the newspaper, and I thank the town for arranging for that, and also onto the website, allowed people to provide written comments, and there have been none. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, Michelle, is there anything else that you'd like to say about it?
No, I mean, I think we've been part of this community, or the Lutheran Home has been part of the community for well over 100 years. Essentia has been the owner of the business for all of that time. It was previously known as Lutheran Social Services, so people may be familiar with them. They rebranded about 7 years ago to the new Essentia Care Alliance. But we have every intention of keeping all of the good works that are happening at the Lutheran Home, and we just hope to make it better. We have plans to renovate the rest home, which if you've had friends or family there, it's known as Parley Manor. It's a 14-bed rest home, and it's the only part of the entire property that has not been fully renovated by Essentia in the past 5 years. So it would just bring it up to full, nicer capacity and provide bathrooms in the rooms of all of those residents, which I'm sure anyone who lived in a congregate or community setting would appreciate having their own bathroom in their home. So it's all really for the good of the community, and we'll be purchasing the real property from its current owner. We own the business, they own the property, and now we want to be sure that we have full ownership of the property so we can continue to do the good work that we do.
Any questions from the board, anything?
I don't have any questions, but I'll say my mom had her first job at the Lutheran Home, and my grandfather spent his final days there. So it's a special place for our family, and I'm excited to hear that you guys are taking on this and doing this work, and the Lutheran Home will remain in Southbury. I think it's a big part of our community, so thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And my grandparents were there, so, and my mother was a social worker for the state of Connecticut and said Lutheran Home.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much.
Yeah, dear friends of ours have a parent who's a resident, and they, especially in the past year, have been so impressed with the staff and with everybody there and care of their mother. So thank you for that, and looking forward to continuing to have you serve our town for a long time.
Thank you. It really is our pleasure, and it's really an honor to serve the residents. I'm very happy that we'll continue to do that for a long time to come.
Okay, I guess we'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved?
Got a second, Jason?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions? It carries.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your cooperation and your doing this. Thank you.
Yes,
Fine
thank you
work.
so much,
You
everyone.
can fill that.
Thank you.
I will.
Thank you. Okay, before we continue on public comments, if we could have a moment of silence for the passing of Paul Katzmark. Paul actually was at the Lutheran Home when he passed away. I know he got great care, and he had been on the Cable Advisory Council in 2009 and the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2009, and contributed to our community. Thank you. Our volunteers are always, it's amazing to me that they volunteer right up towards the end. If I could indulge, I know we brought up about Harmon Andrews. I did take the liberty of delivering a proclamation to Harmon Andrews, and I would like to read it into the record for on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. And it reads, whereas his longevity of life is a blessing to his family and for a community which benefits from his knowledge, dedication, compassion, and experience this individual brings to all, and whereas the town of Southbury recognizes the respect and admiration, the contribution of Mr. Andrews to the citizens of Southbury, and whereas Mr. Andrews has been a volunteer for the town for over 50 years, and whereas Mr. Andrews has served faithfully on the Board of Selectmen, Planning Commission, Board of Assessment Appeals, and whereas Mr. Andrews served as the first selectman of the town of Southbury, and whereas Mr. Andrews faithfully served his country with honor as a captain in the United States Army and veteran of the Korean War, and whereas Mr. Andrews served this town and the country with bravery, compassion, and empathy and grace. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, First Selectman Jeffrey A. Manville, of the town of Southbury on the behalf of the Board of Selectmen and the citizens of Southbury, honor and thank Mr. Harmon Andrews in recognition for his devotion to the town. And I did deliver that to him and visited with him a little bit and thanked him again for his service.
Would it be appropriate to send that out as a press release?
I'm not sure we can put that out. Sure. Okay, next up is public hearing, or I'm sorry, public comments. Is there any public comments? Are there any public comments? And are there any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements and correspondence. From there, we'll move to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
I think there's one issue of concern related to the term of appointment to one of the people.
Yeah, I just had I had a question. I mean, out of curiosity, maybe it's fine. And I
Is there a
just-
motion to remove something from the consent agenda?
No, I just have a question on it. So on the LEPC, I know Jason serves as our liaison, but it has you appointed until you personally until 2023 as the person of the Board of Selectmen, but our terms expire this year, so I just wondered how that worked.
The position is a Board of Selectmen position, so
Yeah,
if I'm not on this board, I would resign from the LEPC. But
Okay, I just wanted to know because it named you specifically, so I was just thinking, you know, if we lock you in, so to speak, if we just say Board of Selectmen liaison, and then we know that we appoint you.
we're appointing members so the body can act, so you actually have to appoint a person.
Okay,
You
fair
can't
enough.
appoint a body.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
We already.
We did all
Yeah.
that. Okay. Call the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Just a little note on that, we are going to have a parade. So, which is awfully nice, and it won't be as big as normal, but it will be. We'll be having it. I hope everybody will be there. Minutes of May 6th, 2021. I have a motion for, thank you, Mike. Justin, second?
Sure.
Sure, there you go. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Business procurement,
Motion to approve?
thank you. Second? Mike,
I'll
thank you.
second it.
George got it. He beat me to it.
Okay, George got it. That's good. Any discussion on that?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Transfers? Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Jason?
Second.
Thank you, Jason. Any discussion on the transfer? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And it carries. Okay. Unfinished business, Essentra Care Alliance. I think we've already taken,
That's done.
Yeah.
we've done that. Oh, boy, we're moving along. Community Relations Task Force, if we could bring up the opinion. So it's our town attorney has opined on the constitutionality of having clergy. And he has said that basically, if you've all read it, it's okay to have clergy. It's not a problem with the separation of church and state. So if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to move forward with filling the Community Relations Task Force. I have reached out to I wanted to get this first before we went further with the school and stuff. If it's okay with the Board of Selectmen, Mike and I will try to work on that next week and get a little further on that.
As we discussed at our last meeting, we outlined how we would approach it, so that's great. And thanks to Attorney Tinley for a very thorough analysis and review, so it's appreciated.
Okay.
So is the plan to get, solicit essays from high school students?
Yes.
And then what's the
Same
how
thing.
are we gonna go about filling the other positions?
What's the selection process overall, really, would be my,
I'm sorry?
what's the selection process? Who's gonna be involved in picking those?
Well, first, I'd like to get it to the school because they're gonna close school pretty quick, so they can get that information out and get them to send the essays. I'm sure they're gonna be able to send them in during the summer or early summer to get that done, get that started. I think we'd reach out to the clergy to get some, see which of the clergy we would want to make, there's some who are interim, some who are busy, and see if we can
It's gonna rotate like we talked about.
rotate like we talked about. From there, we can put out into the, we can put out in, on the, I would think we could do it on Facebook and on our website, and then put a press release into the paper about the essays for people,
The community
community.
positions. And then, what I thought it would be, since Jeff and I were gonna be the liaisons, that we come back to you with recommendations from submitted applications.
I asked the region when it came to the essays, we probably will get a lot of them. But I also thought by reading the essays, we may learn something,
Sure.
good or bad.
Yeah.
But we would have a lot of information on what the young people, there may be different opinions, different ideas, different, whatever it is, it will be. We would get, as a board, a better idea of how they're feeling. I mean, I wouldn't, not just somebody who's currently working or directly involved in their operations, but there may be someone else who writes something, maybe we can learn something. Any other questions on that? Okay. Tax incentive task force. We're still working on that. We have a few from the Board of Finance. We're waiting to hear back from some other people, and I should have that ready for June 3rd for that.
I had communicated this to John Monteleone, and he reached out to the commissioners on the Strategic Plan Commission, and 2 volunteered, Mitchell Goldberg and Dave Solaz. A 3rd volunteer was Ron Conti, but I think Ron is already on planning, and I don't think we want to put him in
Yeah.
here as well, so I kind of mentally excluded him from the list, but you do have 2 other volunteers who aren't currently engaged with very many commissions or committees.
Okay, so we'll have on June 3rd, we should have something together. Okay. Any new business? No new business, isn't it? It's nice.
Well, I had a couple of things.
Okay.
We got it there so fast, it's like my brain is not quite engaged. One of the things I've been thinking about for a while, and I wonder if it's worth doing, and I'd propose this under new business, and we can talk about it if we want to, is that we set up a system where each department head would be required to establish every year 5 goals or objectives for the coming fiscal year. Now, we're kind of starting our fiscal year soon, so it might be a good time to think about that. Do I need to make a motion to discuss this and have it seconded, or do you just want to talk about it in general?
Well, you can make a motion.
I don't know, I just get, kind of, I get criticized sometimes for not following proper protocols.
I'd be comfortable adding something to the agenda if you want to talk about it under new business. We don't have to take any action.
No, just discuss it.
You know, and just to clarify, when you talk about being criticized about procedure, it's actually state law. That's why I make those points. So if we want to talk about something at our meeting that's not on our agenda, you need to make a motion to add it to the agenda. That's why I raised that point.
Right.
Well, I'm
so-
good with that,
so-
and I'm not as facile with state procedural law as you are, obviously, and But do we need to make a motion to discuss this? So I'll.
Yes, you
I'll
need to.
move that discussion forward
What's the
What-
motion?
What discussion?
of the proposal to require department heads to establish goals on an annual basis.
Go ahead.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of adding this to the agenda, please signify it by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. It's added to the agenda. George, is there something else you wanted to add? While we're at it?
Well, the other thing that's come up is in the SPC meeting, the members asked for a determination on whether we should combine planning and zoning. I don't have an opinion on that at this point, one way or the other. I think there's merit in discussing it, but I don't have an opinion either way. But the members of the group did ask that the board, this board, make some kind of determination. And I will say that most of the members felt that the analysis done by Frank Pauza contained sufficient justifications to make the transition and combine these two commissions. I think there's a lot more that we need to consider and look at before that happens, but I'm just passing this along. I don't know if this is appropriate to put in new business or where it should go. I could cover it in my liaison report. So I leave it to you,
I think the difficult, so,
you masters
I
of
mean,
Roberts.
I don't think we can discuss this without adding it to the agenda. I just make a comment that this would have to change by charter. So, and we are in the middle of a plan of conservation and development right now, which is gonna take close to, they could say could be a year, and a affordable housing plan. So I think, personally, I think it would be best to leave, not to do anything with either commission at this point. If they wanna look into it further, and present it down the road closer, I would hate to disturb the work that's being done by the planning commission at this time. I think they have enough on their plate without having to work on what it would take to combine them. But we can add it to the agenda if you'd like.
I think we should. I mean, we've
Make a
already had
motion,
a
please.
rather detailed discussion on it, but I'll make a motion to add this topic of combining planning and zoning to the agenda of new business.
Second.
Made and seconded, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it carries. So going back to the first motion for under new business. Go ahead,
Okay.
George.
I mentioned this notion of having goals, and the number 5 kind of came up at the last IT steering committee meeting, and it was kind of unanimously embraced by the group. Everybody there thought it was a good idea to have that sort of goal. So they asked Dave Richards to create a list of his top 5 goals for the coming budget year. Of course, the IT committee is only advisory, and all it can do is provide advice and guidance on how those goals can be achieved or not. I would say that the process of management by objectives is fairly standard in the business world, and I don't see why it would not apply well to town operations as well. I mean, you can call it a modern management technique. I put modern in quotes, but it's been around since the middle of the last century. So it's hardly modern, but I think it is effective. My first management job I got in 1975, which some of you haven't even been born then. But even then, even in 1975, I had to work under an MBO system, management by objectives, and all the managers and key employees had to go through that. And it seemed to work. I mean, the company I was with did phenomenally well. They good growth and financial success on every account. I have seen this practice adopted by at least one other municipality, and this particular one had a town manager and a board of selectmen, just as a point of reference. And I was kind of impressed. It was a one-page document, and all the 5 main department were listed there, and they had their goals were outlined. It was kind of nice. I liked it. I think having goals allows the town to see where we want to go in the future, allows us to think about it, forces us to think ahead and say, okay, this is where we want to go, this is what we want to do, rather than just kind of go with the flow, respond to emergencies, with no defined aspirations except perhaps to retain the status quo. It also allows town management and ultimately the voters to evaluate the performance of the town and its various departments to an objective standard. So I think it'd be a good thing to do, and that's really all I have to say about it right now.
Anybody else? I think this is, it's intriguing, interesting. I think from my standpoint, number one, you're asking, is the IT steering going to set the goals and objectives for employees, and are we going to?
No, the IT steering group isn't setting any goals. They're asking Dave to set the goals, and then they're just gonna come back and say,
Right.
okay, these are the goals, we think they're good, or
Right.
maybe we change them. But I don't think the steering committee has any authority to set the goals. And suggest and recommend, that's about it.
IT steering is there to steer our technology and what we should be using, what type of technology is coming, whether we're using servers or the cloud, technical things such as cybersecurity, things of this nature. What I'm seeing here is that we have an IT steering committee for some reason now. As you said, you've seen this used other places. This is an IT steering committee looking into management of a department. And I don't think that's appropriate for IT steering. I think that's appropriate for the Board of Selectmen, but not appropriate for IT steering to take discussed. Mike?
Yeah, certainly in my career, I've also led departments and had similar sort of experiences, I think, as George. I think, if we were gonna move this forward, I think ultimately, I don't actually think it would be to the Board of Selectmen. I think it would be to the first selectman, who in our town serves as the chief executive of the town. I think, if I'm hearing George correctly, I think that, the idea of having with each of the commissions and their respective department heads who usually sit in on, in those meetings, just serve as advice, so the individual department head would establish what they believe are appropriate goals based on the budget, based on, clear needs, and often it's gonna be driven by what their primary budget funding needs were, because those will be the primary, projects in the year ahead. And then they can go and present it first to their respective commission, just to get feedback, purely for advice and feedback, and then they can finalize them based on that feedback, give them to you, and that's really it. And that's really, and you could, it gives, I think it actually, I'm curious as to why, when we engage with the HR, outside, council, that it hadn't come up, because I do think it's sort of a somewhat standard operating procedure, and it wouldn't be necessarily a bad idea. I think that what there would be, if you do this, because it is the fear of employees, because I know it on the other side, is, well, what if I don't meet my goal? Do I get punished? Do I get, is there some kind of punitive issue? So I think that's one of the complicating factors here. There's also some factors I'd assume if we have any union or labor contracts around that as well. But I think in theory it's worth at least, looking into, because I think it would make, it's about accountability, and it gives you a piece of paper that says you felt like, you said you were going to achieve this, we didn't, why? Here's an improvement plan. Let's get you on an improvement plan to help and support you. And then I think it protects the town from potential liability if there's some performance issue that we don't feel is up to par, where a hard decision needs to be made. So I think it's worth exploring and having a conversation with our labor attorney and just talking, and maybe an HR, consulting for folks to see how we might implement it.
Yeah, I know certainly at my job, anytime I have yearly goals that I come up with, and we have project goals, so there's different layers of goals. And I certainly, when we go through this process, and I would expect much of the same here, If you're not meeting a goal, there's not a repercussion. It's more like the military. Let's go through it after action report style, see what worked, what didn't work, what can we learn from, how can we grow from this. So I think that when it comes to employees, it certainly makes sense, and it even makes sense for our boards and commissions if they have something that they're looking to sit down and achieve every year to. I think of like EDC as a great example for that. You know, is there something that we want to achieve within this year? Is it, you know, a certain measurable goal of increased businesses, or how can we have an event where people are coming into this town, or whatever the case may be. I'm just spitballing here, but I think that there's benefit for boards and commissions as well as employees together and separate to grow from this, and the town to be able to grow from this as well.
Anybody else?
I think it's a worthwhile discussion. I think we probably do some of it during budget season, to the extent the board would be involved in something like this, like that would be the, you know, probably the venue as we're looking at each department. We actually do it with IT, where we go through the projects they're looking at and what projects they can accomplish, won't accomplish, and which ones they want funding for, and things like that, or, you know, senior services and what their goals are for the coming year. So I think we do it with some of our committees. The question would become to what, you know, how formalized it should become, and whether or not it should be a board level thing. I tend to agree. I think that sort of gets a little granular and micromanaging from the board's perspective when you have a chief executive officer who's responsible for the management of the town. It seems to be more at that level. So I'd be interested in more thoughts from the first selectman on how to implement something like that. And that sort of goes to my last comment, and it's a comment that I'll make because I've made it a half a dozen times this year. Every time this has happened at one of our meetings, and I'll make it again. These conversations would be a lot more productive and fruitful if we had some notice prior to the meeting that these are the types of things that we wanted to discuss, so we all could come into the meeting having given some thought to it. So I'm hesitant to go too far down the path without having had the ability to do that before here, but those are my preliminary thoughts, you know, just hearing what's going on tonight.
So let me just say, as the first selectman, I believe where we get into our goals and objectives is during the budget process. And I'll give you an example. In the past, they were funding the road program. And the complaint from the Board of Finance was we're not going to keep funding that road program if the money's not being spent and it's not reaching an objective. And obviously, I asked them not to. And in 5 years, 85% of our roads don't need work. So if you look at getting something, money was funded for, say, the fuel project. Is it completed? Is it up and running? That was a major goal. There's always small things to do in the meantime. So I think the budget process of expectations, that when you fund projects, it's my management or the first selectman, whoever's sitting in the seat, to come before the board to explain why the project wasn't completed. You know, I think that's what the Board of Finance is always saying is, how come this wasn't done? I mean, we funded it, why wasn't it? And there's gonna be times when something happens and you're not gonna be able to. So I think to some degree, we already have that management in place versus, you know, they give our goals. So the Public Works Director will come and sit and say, okay, I need X amount for the parks, I need X amount for the fences around Settlers Park, I need X amount for getting, enhancing Park and Rec. Director will say, I need X amount for new swings and playgrounds or what have you. And they have the money, and they need to give a plan of how they're gonna get that done when they give it to us and tell us as management. So I think a lot of that's already in place, and it's at the end of the year where the project's completed. Other than that, you know, I think we're already there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think we absolutely, and Jason referenced it too, I think we do this in somewhat of an ad hoc way throughout the budget process, without question. What I don't think we necessarily do as well is, as we're getting to the next budget cycle, go backwards and just take a look at it. And we do it, we look at old minutes, we say, you know, someone says, didn't we last year approve this thing? Whatever happened with that? So I do think, Jason used the word, like, how formal this gets. I think that's the question, right? That's the question. Is there a way, coming out of those sort of budget planning meetings, to say, okay, here are your 5 goals that you laid out to us, and you have a templated piece of paper that every department head uses the same one and says, and it doesn't necessarily need to be 5, whatever, pick a number, 3 to 5, everyone doesn't have the same number of goals. So here are your top goals. And it just serves as a reference point and a tool for accountability when we get to the next budget cycle, to say, okay, these were your priority projects that we were looking at. Some were budget issues, some were not, maybe. And then I think also, same thing, I'd talk to, whether we can talk to an HR consultant or and or a labor attorney, just about, to me, it's about protecting the town also. In the case of a performance issue, you have agreed upon goals that, you know, a department head may sign off on, and you sign off at the beginning of a fiscal year, based on largely, I think, the budget conversations we have in the spring. And then you have that piece of, you just have it. You know, so I think it is, how formal do we want to get? I don't think we want to over formal. We're not a corporation in that regard, but we're still a $20 million plus business, you know, in many ways. We're a $20 billion organization that is wholly human driven, right? It's driven by people, both employees and volunteers, frankly. So I just think I think it's worth, you know, and to Jason's point, I think we should explore it and then put it back on the agenda for another time under own business and see how we do it.
So-
I think the other comment that I'll make too is that we're talking about everything in a monetary standpoint. This happens at budget and it's related to projects, and there are a lot of other things that happen within the town that we can have goals on that aren't related to the budget, that don't have to do with funding projects. I think of Park and Recs and senior services. They could say, well, I want to grow our summer program by 25%, or I want to have more seniors enroll, and at a X percentage. I'm not trying to, finger point at anybody, just using these as examples. None of that necessarily costs money. It's not something that we're going to discuss in the budget project. It's not a goal that's going to come up in the budget process, but these are things that I imagine that these departments are looking at and discussing, and we can kind of formalize those goals and review them and say, again, after action report style, did we meet that goal? Why didn't we? What do we think we can do next year to continue to grow that programming, to continue that outreach? That has nothing to do with the budget.
That's a good point. I think the budget is something that we as a group, we spend weeks and maybe even months, building through it and working through it, and we understand a lot of the things that are in there. But I don't think the folks in town see it that way. I mean, they might like to see a little short list. Okay, these are the 5 things that Public Works is going to focus on, and these are the 3 or 4 things that the Senior Services Group is going to focus on. Like Emily says, they may not be monetary. They may just be targets, membership targets, or maybe you're creating a new program in Park and Rec, and that should be highlighted. I think it's a good thing to do. I mean, it's fairly standard practice across industry. I don't know if government does this very much. I mean, like I said, I've only seen it done in one town. But they did a nice job with it. I can find that and send it to you folks.
CCM might have, this is the kind of thing that
They
if someone
yeah.
has resources, it could potentially be a CCM.
So government is business in its own way, and I think the addition to it is that everything that we should be doing as a board and as a town should be inspiring confidence in government. I think that would be nice for the public to see. I think that they could get into that in a way. Here we're setting our goals, we're meeting our goals, we're delivering to you as the townspeople. There's something that we can report back on. I certainly think that would be enjoyable. It's something people relate to.
Yeah, it was interesting that with no public works director in place yet, there was questions from some Board of Finance people and some others, and the amount of money left in the budget right now for working on the roads. And the comment was, you cannot spend that money by the end of the fiscal year. And the answer was, yes, we can. The chip sealing's in place, and the quotes were done, and they're booked, and they're currently chip sealing. And that, sometimes I think people forget. It looks like a lot of money to some people to spend, but in the roads, it's not. But again, we knew we had to make, because we knew it was in the budget, we knew it was expected to be done, the project, because the money was there. And, so that's the measure, one of the measures of achieving the goals you set during the budget season. If there's a program they want to see enhanced, generally the program costs some sort of money and it goes into their line item somewhere. So, so I think we can take a look at that, and get more information. I mean, we weren't prepared for this tonight at all, but, we'll take a look at it. Okay, the next on, motion was
Planning and zoning.
Planning and zoning.
planning and zoning.
The request from the Strategic Plan Commission to have the board make a determination whether we're gonna move ahead combining, whether we're just not gonna do it, or whether we're going to form an additional study group to look at it further. That's what they're asking for.
So again, I would not recommend to this board, and I would vote against it, any movement towards disrupting the plan of conservation and development and an affordable housing plan with any discussion at this point until they're through their work. I think they have more than enough on their plate with what they're doing now, and I think their input is extremely important to the combining of if they were to combine, their thoughts and how that process, I think we really need to get the POCD and the affordable housing plan done right, and I really hesitate to have distractions.
I totally agree that you don't want to do anything like this in a disruptive fashion, but once they're through with POCD and affordable housing, does it make sense to combine them at that time, or at least consider it? It would give us, I don't know, a year maybe to review the possibility and make a recommendation.
I think it will require that they participate, both planning and zoning, and the chairs and land use would have to participate. And again, we have all new people in land use. Our land use administrator was called and asked about her opinion, and she said, I do not believe I've been here long enough to really formulate an opinion. But she said, I also said it seems to be working, so I would leave it alone. Does that mean that that land use administrator really understands the complexities of this? I would say no. So between many people being new, a process that currently is working, and the plan of conservation and development, I say if we get to where the plan of conservation and development is concluded and the affordable housing plan is concluded, I think at that time we could start having discussions with them on their perception of how that would work and how well it would work.
I would just mention that 68% of the towns in our COG are doing it in a combined way, so there must be some reason for that. I mean, it can't be the worst possible system. I'm not advocating combining, don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to be the liaison, the good liaison to the hardworking folks on SBC, and this is what they're asking.
I think we need to consider the hardworking folks that are on the planning commission, and I think we need to have the hardworking folks on zoning who have done a tremendous job of how our plan of conservation and development, how our town has developed, the quality of life that we have had here. And I think we owe it to them to let them work their plan of conservation and development, the key piece. Again, if they get everything done, there's no rush. It's been working for, how long have we had planning and zoning? It's been working. Justin?
Well, the other point that I think you made, Jeff, that I think is very salient is that this would require a change to the charter. So that right there tells us that there is no rush. I don't recall any time in the 16 years I volunteered with the town that we opened up the charter for one issue. We always wait for the 5 years, and I think think that's something that we can continue to do in this instance. Like you say, we've had this set up for at least 60 years or more. But I'll say this, based on the information that I've been presented with, I'm an advocate for it at this point. But I think we do the more, we prioritize. You know, we have to get the POCD done. We have to get our first affordable housing plan ever on paper by next year. And I think those two things are the focus, and then we'll have time after that to open this issue again and go deep on it. And, you know, the folks on the third floor that are new, or on those committees that are new, will be more seasoned at that point. And, you know, we can come, I think, to a good decision at that time.
Mike?
Yeah, and I would concur. I agree in theory, everything I've read and seen. The presentation last week, you know, and other readings I've been doing, I think it's absolutely worth exploring, but I don't think there's an urgency that's required here. There's nothing that is broken in many ways. It can certainly maybe be improved, but I don't think it's broken. And priority is the right word. I think we have some priorities ahead of us. You know, the planning commission and the staff are busy, and they're going to get busier over the next year. So I think it is something that we, you know, even if we decide not to wait a full 5 years since the last charter, we could come back in a year and say, you know what, we now have the affordable housing plan, we now have a POCD, and maybe we do need to create it. Maybe there suddenly is some greater sense of urgency to do this. I don't think we need to make that decision today. You know, so I think it's worth bringing back up once we get through this really important year of work that needs to be done. Because I think it is, like, same thing, everything I've read, I would likely be an advocate for it, because I think it will make for a more efficient process, both frankly for our staff, but also make us a friendlier town to do business with. I think that, you know, Kevin would likely agree with that as well at some point, is my bet, and he spoke, I think, in favor, he's spoken in past in favor of at least exploring it. I just don't think it has to be today.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just agree with the comments that have been made. I do have a question for Selectman Bertram. You brought up, you say you're not advocating for or against it, you're the liaison. So I'd just like to ask you, as the liaison, having listened to all the meetings and been there, part of the discussions, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what would you like to see this board do on this topic?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I have not made my mind up as far as what should happen here. I think there's some compelling reasons to do it, but I'm also mindful of what happened back, 5 years ago now, when, maybe it was 6 years ago, when we not this board, but a prior board combined Park and Rec and Senior Services. And there were all very compelling reasons to do it, and everybody felt good about it, and it seemed like the thing to do, and it turned into a not such a great situation, and we had to have a divorce a few years later. So I'm very leery of combining these two groups, but I haven't made up my decision is to say, no, we shouldn't do it, and I haven't said, yeah, we should. I'm kind of in the middle. I'd like to learn more. My feeling is that we should investigate this further with maybe a task group that includes planning people, zoning people, land use people. I mean, all the right people that Jeff is talking about need to tone in on this before we do anything. And I think that's what I would suggest. But I would also suggest that we not wait until we convene a charter revision commission in the future, because this is going to take a lot of work. And the charter revision people have a lot of things on their plate besides this. I don't think they're going to be able to do it justice. I think it should be done by a separate group ahead of the Charter Commission convening, and present their recommendations at that time.
And I would agree with that. It's that my concern is how full their plate will be right now. And I'd hate to distract from their goal at this point. I would say plan of conservation and development is probably, if you're on a planning commission, probably the biggest work you will do while you're on that commission. And that's going to set our sails, so to speak, for years to come. So I'm not saying, I think if once we get our plan of conservation and development in place, I think, and the affordable housing plan in place, and at that point, we could start the discussions and, so they could give the attention they really need to give the right information. So it can, if it was to be combined, it could be combined, it would happen well without, sometimes I find sometimes there's this urgency to do something for the sake of doing something, and I don't mean just this here. And sometimes you get criticized for taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, let's look at this. And you get, and people get, people accuse others of stalling, not doing, how come? It's, in any organization, it's easy to talk about it. But getting it done with our jobs and everything that else that we're in our life, it's difficult to execute. If we were in corporate and I was, okay, Mike, this is your job, this is your goal, I expect a report from you. I would expect that Mike would return a report to me in 3 months and then probably a final report within 9. That's a tough thing when we're asking efficient local government not to be top-heavy with a lot of people. So I think I think when the plan of conservation and development is done and the affordable housing plan is done and we're prepared to take it on and get the right information, I would say that would be the time to start gathering the information. Okay.
So I think the only thing I'll add to this, and I'm not convinced that this is the right direction to go, combining them, but I know that this has come up in discussion within the last few months, and when we talk about, well, we're not going to open the charter because we open every 5 years, and that's how we've always done it. And I think we all know the joke, the slow wheels of government. Well, doing things the way that we've always done it is the enemy of progress. And so I just ask the board to be considerate of that, not necessarily on any one issue, but in whole, that we think about those phrases and how they're impeding progress for our town.
Okay. Anything else on this discussion? If not, we'll move on to,
Jeff, just to finalize this, so I will go back to the SPC people, I'll relay this conversation, and I'll say, we've committed informally to open this up to further review after the POCD and affordable housing.
correct,
policy.
yeah.
So that could be a year and a half down.
Right.
Okay, that's all, I just want to make sure
when we
we're
get to that point,
on the same page.
yeah, nobody's saying no, we're just saying,
No, I totally agree. If they're doing POCD, they need to focus on that. We
Yeah.
can't disrupt that
It
process.
seems to me that everybody here is actually saying the same thing, at least in that regard. There may be some disagreements around the edges, but I think
Agreed.
that's sort of the message that we're all comfortable with, which seems to make sense in this instance. And waiting because of the very important legitimate reasons that have been articulated by Justin and Jeff is not stalling progress for the town. It's actually assisting in progressing towards things that are very important for the future of our town.
okay, so we'll convey that to the strategic planning people, and we'll go from there.
Thanks for taking the time to discuss that.
Yep. For Selectmen's report, there's not a lot. As you know, the chip sealing, there's been, of course, the calls about chip sealing. They're going on. But our citizens do seem to be receptive. I've spoken to people on the phone. They've been very upset when I explained the process and asked them for being patient for 2 weeks, driving 15 miles an hour on the chip sealing. They seem to be receptive. I try to remind the public that, why don't you just pave this? Well, chip sealing for 2 weeks on a road is disruptive. Milling and paving a road, as we will find out on Route 172, we're waiting for it, is extremely disruptive, and it takes a lot longer than 2 weeks. So Again, if the public listens to this,
And it's
they
10
are
times
being
more
paid.
expensive to mill and pave than it is to chip
Yes.
seal per mile, as we've seen, so people don't think that through when they say, just pave it.
I explained that our process, and if you're talking to someone, please remind them that one of the benefits of this is that we were able to take almost $800,000 reduction in the budget this year because of the sealing and crack sealing and chip sealing in the process. But just to let you know that for the most part, once explained and understood, please do 15 miles an hour. Please do not go 30, 40. That's when you run into trouble with your brakes or whatever. Again, Memorial Day Parade. Look forward to being able to parade with everybody. That's a great thing that can happen, and I hope it's a beautiful day and we can honor our soldiers with that. So it will not be as big, trying to get organized with all the bands and the younger people. But let's remember the purpose of the parade is not just to put your child out on the road walking down with the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, but the parade is really to honor our veterans and those who in the military. We also the company that the woman who did our for our small cities grants, which is a key part of keeping the homes of people who need help. It's a great program. Is retiring, so we have an RFP out for another company to run that. It's been it's a huge success. I think it does well for not just the people who take advantage of it, but it also helps with the people who live next door to these homes, that they don't deteriorate. I am going to, I know I haven't really said too much about this, but I'm going to advocate that if any small cities grants are done in Heritage Village, that the meter, that could be incorporated into. So if you're doing a $10,000 project, you can incorporate that meter, and if you know how the small cities grants work, you don't have to pay that back until you sell the property, and there's no interest charge. So you don't have to pay until your property is sold. So this would be a way for those who are really in need, who really do not have the upfront money to put a meter in, like they're trying to do with, get there, because they're a flat rate. This could perhaps be a way for that to work to their advantage without burdening those who can't put the money out for it. And then they can conserve on their water bill, which if they care to do, which should help them. So that's I'm gonna push the small cities grants, if it's in the village, to go towards, wrap that right in with the project, which makes a lot of sense to do. That might take care of some of the issues over there. Reports from liaison, Selectman Bertram.
Start with the Strategic Plan Commission. They seem to dominate the discussion lately. They had a meeting on May 13th. It was well attended, as usual. John Monteleone and the group have decided to compile a list of credentials, like a one-page summary of each commissioner's credentials, one page per commissioner, for distribution. And there's a lot of very talented, experienced people on the group, so I think that might be a worthwhile exercise. The SPC is also asking for an update on the questions that were sent to the state regarding the status of the Southbury Training School. I haven't heard anything back. Is there any news on that?
Nothing.
We haven't heard anything back. Have they even acknowledged receipt of the questions?
They've got them.
Have they acknowledged that they got? that
Well,
they have
yeah,
them?
they've got them.
Okay, so we know they have them.
We know they have them.
Okay, I'm just, again, this is the question that came out of the SPCs. I'm forwarding it along to the board as a liaison. What else do we have here? They're also asking, and this is something that I again, I'll forward this along, I have my own thoughts on this, but for Attorney Tinley to opine on whether there's reasons why the Wetlands Commission cannot be combined with the Conservation Commission. I'm not endorsing that, I'm just passing along the request from the strategic plan folks. Is that something that we can do? Is it gonna, is something?
I see no reason for our town attorney to opine on combining commissions. We can combine, the Board of Selectmen can legally combine any of them. I think with the problem with wetlands is a federal mandate.
Right.
And conservation just looks after our properties. It's two
They're not-
completely different things.
So we're not gonna ask
I don't see
the attorney wasting his time and money
Yeah,
to.
it just,
Okay.
I thought they came to a decision. Wasn't that part of one of their presentations to us?
A decision on,
I thought SPC had made some statement to us on that topic.
they may
I
have,
guess
they've
so.
made
Some-
various statements at various times, but at the last meeting, they very specifically requested a legal opinion on that, because it's been told to them that it's not, because of, wetlands is a federal thing, and conservation is just kind of a general,
Maybe that's what they included in one of their things. That
yeah, they might have
what they
said
had heard
something
on
about
that, okay.
that. Again, I'm forwarding along the request. If the answer is no, then that's fine with me too. That's the answer. John Monteleone says he will have a list of 5 new projects by June, after their meeting on June 10th. I think that's their next meeting. They have been working on this process of winnowing down their project list for some time. So I'm curious to see what it is myself. They've kind of kept me out of the loop, which is fine. They're also considering hosting a new round of public workshops like what was done during the creation of the initial strategic plan documents. And they're considering running another town opinion survey poll, again, like the one that was done prior to the initial strategic plan. That would have some cost to it, obviously. As I've said before, these commissioners are eager to take on projects, either as a lead or support role. These folks want to be active and involved, and I think we should try to take advantage of their skills and abilities. They're offering their time and energies at no cost to the town, and let's see if we can use them in more things. And as I mentioned before, there's 3 members who volunteered to be part of the tax incentive task force: Dave Solaz, Mitchell Goldberg, and Ron Conti. So I'll throw their names in the hat. Energy Task Force, the meeting was postponed because of a scheduling conflict. The next meeting is set for 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 26th. I'm told that the VNM application has been completed by Chris Whitman and is now being reviewed by Jeff Tinley. We're still not in the queue, but we're getting closer, and there's been a lot of real progress made on this goal. I mentioned one thing that I did to my house personally, and also has been discussed at the Energy Task Force, and that's the process of air sealing. It's a process where you spray this gaseous substance into the HVAC ductwork. I know this building doesn't have ductwork, but some of our buildings, I think, do, like the library. It's not hard to do, doesn't take very long. And in my particular case, the HVAC duct leakage was reduced by about 95%. So the typical leakage was about 25% of my system capacity. So basically, it's by reducing that 25% by 95%. I mean, that's a lot, you know, when you can improve the efficiency of an HVAC system by 25% by spending a little money, I think that's worthwhile. On residential projects, the costs are covered 60% by Eversource. I believe the payback on this for me will be somewhat like around 1.5 years, maybe, might be less. And another benefit is that your heating zones and cooling zones will respond more quickly. So when you ask for cool, you'll get it much faster. I think it's worth looking at for the town, in town buildings, but also I think homeowners in town can also benefit from the process, and I strongly suggest that they look into it, especially since, as we know, energy costs are rising in the future. The Radio Refresh Task Force had a meeting with our consultant, Dan Colton. I believe Dan was the guy that picked out the consultant, and he looks like a pretty good one. Steve Schnell is also involved with the process. I believe the entire task force was in attendance. Again, it was Tuesday, May 11th. And the consultant has a lot of experience with police, fire, and ambulance radio technology, seems highly qualified. He currently lives in New Hampshire, but has roots in Connecticut. He's lived here for a while, moved out for tax reasons, he says. He did give us an initial impression of the two proposals and the companies that submitted them. He's familiar with the technology and these companies, and he knows a lot about this whole thing. And in his view, it's apparent that the proposals were not close to being final, that they need more work, and it's not just fine-tuning. He also made one recommendation that surprised me, frankly, is that we eliminate the T1 lines that we use to currently connect many parts of our radio system. He looked at T1 lines as being the weak link in our chain of radio connectivity. And he said many towns have moved away from T1 and they go to fiber. And he says this should be our very top priority in our project. And before him coming in and saying that, we didn't really consider that to be an issue. He says that the fiber can be installed at no cost to the town, which I find hard to believe, but he insisted that it's very feasible to get that done. John Michaels pressed him on his timing, of how long he's going to take to review and make some recommendations on the proposals. And one of the concerns, and John and I guess Chris Grillo is concerned as well, that the radio equipment we are currently using is no longer supported by the manufacturers. However, there are ways to pirate equipment from old facilities, and we can probably keep going if there is an emergency, just based on finding scrap equipment around. But anyway, the consultant made no commitments, but I think based on what I heard, we'll be okay on the time side. On the plus side, it appears that the project will come in at budget or possibly under budget, so that was good news. As far as Mobile Telecom Task Force, that's been Joe Ruggiero's show lately. He has decommissioned his test fixture and returned the cell phones to Dave Richards for possible town use. They are Galaxy S7s or whatever, so they're fairly new. And Joe has asked the first Selectman's office for assistance in creating an RFP for a possible cell tower at the Purchase Firehouse using Crown Castle as guidance. Road study, nothing to report. IT was canceled because I believe Dave Richards is moving to Southbury. Is that true? Or
I think it's Woodbury.
Is it Woodbury?
Yeah.
Okay, close enough. Thank you.
Selectman Betty.
So, all three of my groups met this week. Investment portfolio met Tuesday via Zoom. Soon that'll be the last time we do that, but all of our accounts are doing very well. Most importantly, the largest of them is our pension fund, obviously, and we are now 78.5% funded there. The gift fund is also doing very well, as is the reserve fund. So no major changes were contemplated or approved. Just your typical rebalancing and things of that nature. Economic development did not get a quorum on Wednesday. Apparently a few people were out of town. I did have a long chat with Kevin. Let's see what we got here. I suppose the things that our townspeople are most interested to know, Chipotle is supposedly opening in June. And the seafood market that just put their sign up in Heritage Village apparently is shooting for a July open. So a couple things that I've heard people are quite excited about.
My wife is very excited about the seafood market.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one particularly is something the town hasn't had in a long time. There's some other good things cooking that aren't quite ready for public consumption yet, including some activity at the old Romatic. Kevin Selectmen's been spending a lot of time training different entities around town, or helping train, I should say, with the online permitting and getting that adopted. We spent some time with the health department this week, and that's going pretty well. The senior commission also met Wednesday afternoon. You know, they had their, I guess we'd call it a soft reopening earlier this month. So it's nice to have some people back in the building. Most of the programs are still not in person. The exercise programs and such are still over Zoom for now, and they'll phase that back in over the next couple months. They are doing, you know, some of the low-cost lunches with New Opportunities, a firm that we've used in the past. And in this case, it's a grab-and-go thing where they're brought to the senior center, people pull up, they're handed a lunch, and they drive away.
They did ask me to go to the picnic today, but I was not able to go. But I understand it went very well. I could have maybe gotten a free lunch, but.
Right, right. The transportation coordinator is in her third week now and is, you know, got a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, getting trained up quickly. And, you know, over the next, we're still basically medical only at the moment, but over the next few weeks, they'll be looking to get back to some of the grocery shopping and things that we did provide pre-COVID. So that's it for my groups for now.
Thank you. Selectman Bucksbaum?
None of mine have met. LEPC meets next week, and the other ones meet the week after.
Selectman Harrison?
The EMS committee reported that the paramedic plan is now through the regional council. They meet next week, so I'm sure I'll learn more about that then. The library met last week. Just kind of a reminder to everybody that their book sale is this weekend, Saturday. They're hoping to have their traditional sale again on April 22nd. They have a Flanders Nature Center display in the fireplace room, and they've begun the interview process for part-time positions so they can get back to their regular hours. There's a lot of updates from them as the COVID restrictions are lifted, including the Connecticut Services for the Blind, welcoming back volunteers in the recording room starting next month. And they anticipate in July the DVD swap will return. Summer programs are now available on the website, and they're going to start their afternoon movies again next month.
I did make an executive decision today to allow them to block off some parking spots so they could put more tables out because it's supposed to be good weather. So I said, I think I'll go out on a limb and say it's okay. So I hope it's very successful sale this weekend. If people are hearing, are listening, a lot of books. They've been collecting a lot of books, and I think they need to get rid of a lot of books, but we'll see. Mike?
Parks and Rec meets next Thursday, so they have not met yet. Planning met, I wasn't able to attend, but I emailed with the chair of the committee. There was nothing of note they wanted me to bring to the Board of Selectmen. There were a couple of sort of standard traditional referrals on signage, and they're starting to dive into the affordable housing plan in particular with discussions with Malone and McBroom. Region 15 met on the 10th. There was a wonderful presentation on that sort of gives me a lot of optimism as we get the Community Relations Task Force going on their Equity and Inclusion Council. I'll actually share, it's on the Region 15 website. I'll share it with this group because I think it can help inform and show the progress that the time it takes to proceed. You know, I don't know if everyone realizes, but the impetus for what was first this Global Citizenship Council and then became the Equity and Inclusion Council were a bunch of 2016 Pomp High School alum who wrote when they graduated and got to college that they weren't prepared for the diversity of the world outside of outside of Southbury and Middlebury, and encouraged this type of initiative to begin. And you know, 5 years later, it's really doing some amazing work, not only for the students, but for the faculty and staff as well. And hopefully, you know, really contributing to it. And I think with us together, we could really do some really great things. So I'm excited about that. Plus, you may have seen it in the news. There's a new elementary school principal at Pomperaug Elementary School, Miss Furman. So that's it.
Very good. Any other business? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It carries. Have a nice night, everyone. Thank you.